Shana Tova, everybody.
Shana Tova.
Chag Sameach and Shana Tova. It's an honor and privilege to deliver the Dvar Torah today, the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Thank you, rabbis, for inviting me. It is a true privilege. Today we read in Bereshit, chapter 1, verse 1. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, והארץ הייתה תוהו ובוהו וחושך על פני תהום, ורוח אלוהים מרחפת על פני המים. ויאמר אלוהים ויהי אור, ויהי אור. וירא אלוהים את האור כי טוב, ויבדל אלוהים בין האור ובין החושך. When God began to create heaven and earth, the earth being unformed and void, with darkness over the surface of the deep, and a wind from God sweeping over the water, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. These are the moments, days and week, in which God began the act of creation, providing us the world order as we know it, the routine of days we so take for granted. When my two children were younger, they attended the Jewish day school in San Francisco Bay Area. Every day began with an all-school assembly where they would routinely recite the morning prayer, the one which we actually recited this morning. מודה אני לפניך, מלך חי וקיים, שהחזרת בי נשמתי בחמלה רבה אמונתך. This prayer gives gratitude for waking up and the gift of being able to breathe the life into every day. I loved standing with them in assembly, starting my day with a moment of gratitude, and often wondered what it meant for them, if anything at all. Years later, I witnessed my father in the final weeks of his life battling lung cancer as he struggled to breathe, tethered to an oxygen machine pumping the source of life through his body. Watching him struggle to take in every ounce of air, I recalled the days standing assembly with my children, giving gratitude for the ability to breathe. It was then that I fully understood what taking something for granted truly meant. It is usually something so mundane, so obvious, that we never really stop to think about it. Being grateful for the things we take for granted requires developing some serious muscle. It also brings with it much responsibility. We continue in verse 27 when God created humans on the fifth day. ויברא אלוהים את האדם בצלמו, בצלם אלוהים ברא, אותו זכר ונקבה ברא אותם. And God created man in his image, in the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. On the fifth day, man and woman are created, the only creatures who can continue to participate in God's own creative act, the only creatures on earth who bear moral choice and consequences for our actions. But what does it mean to be born in the image of God? Without a visual, we are left with the question, the intention behind it, and the moral obligation it poses. Like breathing, I have taken my white skin color and privileges it affords me for granted. I have seldomly questioned it nor stopped to consider what it truly means. In 1988, the feminist scholar Peggy McIntosh, who taught at Wellesley College right here, wrote about the concept of an invisible backpack. She writes, "I've come to see white privilege as an invisible backpack of unearned assets which I can count on cashing in each day, but about which I was meant to remain oblivious. White privilege is like an invisible, weightless knapsack of special provisions, maps, passports, code books, visas, clothes, tools, and blank checks." The last few years, and particularly since the racial murder of George Floyd and the COVID outbreak, a giant spotlight has been shifted, now shining on what can be ignored or shoved aside no longer. Like for many, these have been years of reckoning for me. The idea that racial structure in which one race or religion holds itself above others should be in question. It must be. And yet, it is too easy to point fingers or blame others for inequality and racism, when in fact we all play a role. I play a role. I've come to believe that being created in the image of God means not taking for granted my skin color, but rather considering the responsibilities it brings. I must consider what it means to walk into a store while being white. Think about what it means to sit in a lobby of a hotel, not feeling the glances of others, thinking you might be out of place. How about the gift of speaking fluent English? I must consider how it might feel being a Black doctor, having a patient refuse treatment from you. I must think about a white police officer taking away a person's right to breathe. In investigating my white privilege, I need to reflect on my deeply instilled judgments. I must step away, back, and reflect on what it means to be created in the image of a just and equal society. To be created in the image of God means searching for the humanity in each other, not taking it for granted, but working at it and seeking it every day, making space for others who, on the surface, do not look like me. This, I believe, would be continuing to participate in God's creation. As a mixed media artist, I read the text of creation and think of Bereshit, the genesis of an art piece, the magnitude of a black canvas, the white void, the power that lies within it, and the opportunity it might provide. As artists, we joke that the hardest thing is actually not completing a piece, but rather starting it. The act of creation can be daunting. What if we treated every day like a blank canvas, taking a paintbrush and setting a metaphorical intention to the daily creation of a just and equal society? An opportunity to consider what we do with what we've got. This November, I will present my second solo show at Beacon Gallery in Boston. You're all welcome to come visit. The show, titled Humanity is Not a Spectator Sport, addresses the ongoing conflicts of systemic racism, inequality, and our shared humanity as seen through my Jewish white woman lens. It is a culmination of a long reflection on the notion of my privileges I have absolutely taken for granted. It is a call to opt in, to reconsider, to reevaluate, and ultimately to continue to participate in God's creation. As Ibrahim X. Kendi tells Ezra Klein in his July podcast, it is only through changing racially discriminating policies that we can change minds and truly make a difference towards racial equality. I hope the work in the show will provoke, cause discomfort, and challenge. Most importantly, I hope to encourage and inspire others to engage in difficult conversations. It is only through stepping back and considering our role and participation, or the lack thereof, in society, that we can ultimately choose to be active upstanders rather than bystanders. While we may not all have the same passions, if we work to challenge policies for the better, we will improve the world as a whole immeasurably. As Kendi says, an anti-racist future depends on the actions of yours, of mine, of all of ours together. I admit the task at hand seems insurmountable. It is then that I recall from the Mishnah the saying, "Lo aleinu hamlacha ligmor, velo ata ben churin litbatel mimena." You're not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. What strokes, actions, and marks will you put down on your canvas this year? What canvas might we paint together? I invite you to join me on this journey and engage in this conversation internally and with the people around you. It is only by looking back that we can move forward. Shana Tova. May it be a year in which we find the humanity in each other beyond the color of our skin. Shana Tova.